Hey, welcome in to another edition of Gem State Game Day here on IdahoSports.com. We're happy to have you here for another week of 11-man football. It's week 9 of the season. I'm Hayden Uhlenkott, your co-host, your host filling in for the evening. Brandon had some other obligations, and so I decided to take the duties over. And I take that back. I didn't take over the duties. I was handed the duties and then forced to, follow through with it. I'm just playing. But on this prepcast, we'll talk about everything 11-man football from 6A all the way down to 3A, covering all of this week's games. We'll look at the brackets. We'll look at some of the scores and the standings, and we're just excited to bring all that coverage to you. As always, this prepcast is brought to you live on Facebook, YouTube, and our X account. Tune in. If you have any comments in the chat, drop them down. We'd love to hear from you, love to converse with you and get your guys' takes because they're a heck of a lot better than ours. Well, let's bring on our panelists. From East Idaho, the fill-in, Sean Kane. Thanks for joining us, Sean, last second.
Hey, absolutely. I was supposed to do my podcast with Joel last night and had an emergency came up and someone filled in for me. So, one turn deserves a good turn deserves another. So, I'm always ready to fill in.
Absolutely. I bet you did a lot of homework in the last hour.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we also want to bring on the man who has been here for 3 weeks in a row. That's Jonah Wockenfuss. Jonah, what's going on?
I'm like the seasoned vet at this point. I'm just like, it's good to be on here, though.
Yeah, exactly. The intern definitely has more reps than Sean and I this year. But
the 1998 Bulls right there, you're just going for 3.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly what I was trying to come up with. Well, we might as well hop right in it. I'll share my screen, and we will get rolling. First, we're going to start out in 6A. 6A is the biggest classification, and we'll run through the conference standings, hit the brackets. These brackets are Bainey's brackets, what he goes through each and every week, goes through the max preps rankings, figures out, how the bracket's going to lay out if the playoffs were to start today. And then we'll run through that and then look at the slate of games that we have this upcoming week. So going to be a lot of fun, and hope you guys can enjoy it. So Rigby is at the top of the High Country Conference, and they're in a pretty good spot to wrap it up. Highland and Madison, I believe, play next week. That is a massive game, and that's going to decide who's going to come in second. And I mean, it looks like both teams have a chance to make the playoffs. That was kind of in question last week. Right now, it looks pretty good. In the Foothills Conference down in the Treasure Valley, Rocky Mountain and Timberline at the top. That's a huge game upcoming this week. We'll talk about that one more. Capital and Middleton also, I believe, play. There's a lot of games still to be decided in the SIC. Down in the River Conference, Eagle has kind of taken full control of that of that division and in a real prime spot, but there's still a lot of movement between Owyhee and Boise and Kuna and Bora. Even there's not necessarily Bora, but I would say Kuna has an opportunity to move up in those standings. And then in the North Idaho Conference, Inland Empire, Coeur d'Alene in a real good spot to wrap up that conference and get a home playoff game this year. Well, let's switch over to the bracket if everything started today, and let's see how well I can run my operation. These are the max preps rankings. Rocky at 1, Rigby 2. That was a switch up from last week. Eagle still holding strong. Mountain View gets the upper edge on Timberline, and there goes Madison, Coeur d'Alene, Owyhee, Highland, Middleton, Capital, and Boise to round out the top 12. Meridian now on the outside looking in. And Jonah, I'll start with you. Last week, Highland wasn't in a good spot to, they were on the outside. They were at the 13th spot. Wasn't in the playoffs last week. Now they are. What pops out to you this time around?
Well, I can't remember the team that was kind of above them. I think it was an SIC team that Max Preps was putting above. But it's good to see Highland on there because they deserve to be on there. I know they had a tough loss versus Rigby. I think it was 1 or 2 weeks ago, but you can't not include these really good teams in the playoffs. It just doesn't fit to me.
Absolutely. We got a few comments in the chat wondering where the heck Wyatt Helm's at. Joe Barrett, where's Wyatt Helm? Titus Osterman. Where's Wyatt Helm? Well, I'd love to tell you, and I don't know. So that's why we have Joel here. Wyatt Helm. Wow, he's a popular guy. Sean, what the heck's going on?
I mean, hey, I'll do my best to fill in, but apparently this guy's got a fan base I wasn't aware of. He must be signing autographs somewhere. That's why he couldn't be here. He's doing a public event.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, looking at the bracket right now, oh boy, it keeps coming. Gabe Montero, Wyatt Helm. I miss Wyatt Helm. Man, so do I. What is going on?
I kind of feel like he's with these people right now, maybe.
You think he's hanging out with Titus Osterman?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. They all just happened to come in at the same time. Coincidence?
I love it. The comments are coming in, and Wyatt's going to have quite the heyday when he comes back at some point. Well, to start off right now, Rigby is the one, like we mentioned. Timberline would host Owyhee. Mountain View would host Highland. Middleton and Boise, and Madison and Capital. I was looking through it a little bit. I was kind of curious if any of these teams had played, if the playoffs had started today in that first round, and none of them had. But Sean, if you look at that one, what's your kind of take of the 6A? Does it feel right to you? To me, last week, I kind of thought that it didn't feel right with Highland not in it. But this week, it kind of feels a little more what it should be in 6A.
I mean, it looks pretty balanced at this point. You know, you don't have Rocky Mountain and Rigby on the same half like last year, which everyone kind of was disappointed that they had to play in the semifinals and not the championship game. But credit goes to Eagle taking care of business and making it to that championship game. But it feels balanced. I think it's, we're going to have a lot of changes too, because Madison and Highland haven't played, and that's going to decide the two spot out of the High Country Conference 6A. And that's going to be a massive game in a couple weeks here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of games. You'll see it on the slate. It's starting to get very hectic in the last 2 weeks. Everywhere you go, there is a massive game that's going to decide the conference, or a team's going to have the opportunity to move up in the standings. Well, let's switch over to our schedule. There's one 6A game this week and one game at all on Thursday, and that's Capital and Middleton. That's a huge game that's going to decide a lot of things. Capital was in a really big game, a thriller last week against Meridian, ended up winning by 1, and then Middleton ended up losing big time from Rocky Mountain. So that could decide some things there. Jonah, any initial thoughts on that Thursday night game?
Yeah, it's going to be a big game. Middleton, I've kind of had a hard time figuring out if they're like real contenders or not, because the week before they beat Timberline, and then the next week they kind of get rocked by Rocky Mountain. So it's like it's kind of hard to tell what's going on with them. So this is a big indicator to see if they're real contenders or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in this slate for Friday night, we'll go through it one by one, starting in the top. It's Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls. That's a game for Coeur d'Alene to wrap up that conference. Eagle and Bora, also in a spot where Eagle could wrap up their division as well. Highland and Skyline, that's a huge game. It's going to be on IdahoSports.com. Highland's looking to get revenge from last week where they lost by, I think it was 21 against Skyline. Kuna and Boise, that's another huge game that's going to move standings in the conference. Lake City and Lewiston. Can Lake City put together a last-second stretch, upset them, and then maybe beat Post Falls next week? There's Madison and Minico. That's a big game for Madison as well as for Minico. Meridian and Centennial. Maybe Centennial could finish the year strong, get a win to end the year. Mountain View and Owyhee, another big game in the Treasure Valley. Rigby and Hillcrest, probably one of the best games, maybe one of the best teams in 6A, one of the best teams in 5A. That's a huge game there. Thunder Ridge and Blackfoot looking to upset, a 6A school. And then Timberline and Rocky, probably the biggest game, I would say. But Sean, I'll kick it to you. What stands out on the 6A slate?
Oh man, there's 22 reasons why Highland and Skyline is the game. That's because there's 22 state championships between these two teams. This is like two teams of top pedigree, and I'll be broadcasting this game, so I got to plug it a little bit. But yeah, I actually had a chance to talk to Nick Sorrell, Highland's head coach, today, and that loss last week with Rigby left a bad taste in them. Well, 2 weeks ago, left a bad taste in the mouth. They've had a bye week. They're real excited to get out and play after the bye week and kind of play the way they feel like they should play all year, and get Cedric Mitchell the ball and run it. I think we'll have a heavy dose of that. And for Skyline too, I think this is a big game. Just, it's not going to matter in the standings. And it's pretty much going to be, Hillcrest, Skyline in the 1 and 2 spot. But Skyline, they haven't lost a game since Hillcrest. And why start now? And it's really hard to bet against Skyline when it gets towards playoff and late season. They are a playoff team from top to bottom, and it should be really fun. And I think it kind of boosts both teams going forward. It's just Highland wants to get a win. They lost to Skyline last year. Skyline had some big plays, so they want to beat Skyline this year. For Skyline, it just boosts that ranking a little bit, beating a 6A team, and moving into the final, last few games of the season. So that's it's not a 6A matchup, it's a 5A 6A matchup, but it should be really fun. We have a lot of cross classification games this week.
And a lot of big games in those cross classifications as well, speaking, like Rigby and Hillcrest. But Jonah, I feel like, you're the Treasure Valley expert. Maybe there's a Treasure Valley game that piques your interest. What would it be?
There definitely is one, and that is Owyhee going to Mountain View. Both teams are sitting at a pretty similar record. Mountain View's 3-1 in the conference play. Owyehee's 2-2, so it's pretty identical. I'm curious to see how Owyehee's going to bounce back after a very tough loss to Boise. I believe they only lost by 1 point last week, so that's devastating. Let's see how they bounce back, and finish off the season, because they started off real strong, and I still think they're a very good team. And then for Mountain View, this is a good chance for them to stay up in the standings. If I'm not mistaken, Mountain View's actually above. Yeah, Mountain View's above Owyhee right now in the standings. So it's a good game to be able to, a lot of playoff implications in this game. I'm just curious to see which team comes on top, because that could really determine how the bracket stands in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you there. I'll be honest. I thought both of you guys were going to go Timberline and Rocky and Rigby and Hillcrest. That's what I figured you guys would do, so I didn't even prep for those. In the chat, Sam Buffington, Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene might be a fun one. I'm excited to film that one for IdahoSports.com. And then Rigby and Hillcrest, another fun one as well. Totally agree. Well, for the Rigby and Hillcrest game, that's a game I'm excited for. That was Hillcrest's only loss last year, if I'm not mistaken, Sean.
Yeah.
Hillcrest's only loss last year. And so is that a chance for them to get back against a Rigby team that I know is a little beat up and bruised in some of their past games, against Madison? So is that a chance for Hillcrest to gain a little bit more respect? Both those teams are not getting any love from the state of Idaho when it comes to media polls. Both teams think, Rocky and Bishop Kelly are at the clear top of the totem pole. So that's the one that I'm going to keep my eye on, as well as Timberline and Rocky. I think that's a big game. People think Rocky's way above everybody. Is Timberline maybe not that far off? That could be a game where they could easily, take over the conference and be in a spot where they're hosting a playoff game in the second round. So there's a lot of games that are really interesting. Even Coeur d'Alene in Post Falls, that's a game that you would think Coeur d'Alene should handle easily, but Coeur d'Alene has their backup quarterback, Tanner Stern. Hopefully he's still getting reps. Post Falls, a feisty team that's also dealing with a lot of injuries. So should be pretty interesting the further we get into the week. But that'll be it for us on the 5A slate. We're going to take a break and come back. And when we do, we will hit all of 5A action and be back in just a bit.
As Idahoans, we're not afraid to take risks.
All the way. Go. All the way down.
Driving under the influence is not a risk we're willing to take. Be around to do more of what you love.
Welcome back to Gem State Game Day here for week 9 of the regular season, and we are going to go over 5A football. Well, let's start with the Great Basin. Minico, Twin Falls. That's going to be a huge game in 2 weeks to determine that conference. Absolutely massive game to see how real both those teams are. Twin Falls played pretty close to Hillcrest last week, at least in the first half. How would it, fare later on in next week against Minico? In the High Country Conference, Hillcrest has wrapped up that one, it seems like, after the win against Skyline a few weeks ago. You'll see what Blackfoot can do as well. Shelley had a huge win against Bonneville. Are they a team that's for real? I'll get Sean's take in a minute there. And then Century, Sean's favorite team. I don't want to be too honest there, but 7-0. Century has a big win against Preston. It was a tight one. They were down early and they ended up coming back and getting the W. And then Bishop Kelly leading the way in the SIC, 7-0. But Ridgeview, that's a game that we'll see maybe later on in a couple weeks that could decide maybe Ridgeview's this team that we need to keep our eyes on. Columbia also having a really good year, maybe exceeding a lot of expectations. And then in the Inland Empire League, the first game was played, and it was Lewiston and Sandpoint, where Lewiston just took it to Sandpoint, came away with a big win by 27 points. Lewiston plays Lakeland, and in a couple weeks, maybe that's going to be a little different than what we expected heading into the season. I'll get your first initial take on the Bonneville Shelley game last week, Sean. What did you hear that you thought was pretty interesting?
I've been pretty involved with this High Country Conference for a number of years now, and every team has said Shelley is one of the hardest teams they played all year. They played Hillcrest real tough for the first half of the game. Hillcrest just has, I think, more depth and a little more firepower and took them out. I know Century was worried about Shelley. They'll run the wing tee and then they'll move into a spread, all in the same kind of packages. And like pregame, we talked about this earlier. I picked Bonneville to win this game, and Shelley took care of business. And you've got to kind of start, watching out for Shelley. They're that team that's going to meet you in the back alley of the first round, and you don't want to play them. So, they're still on the brink of making it, and as we'll see, but it's a team with some momentum after that win over Bonneville.
Totally agree with you there. Well, let's take a look at the 5A bracket first, the Max Preps rankings. As always, they're our favorite, and Hillcrest is at the top. That switched from last week over Bishop Kelly. Some people might disagree. Skyline at number 3, Lakeland at 4, Twin Falls at 5, Blackfoot at 6. Sandpoint actually moves up after the loss to Lewiston at 7, Lewiston up to 8, Minico at 9, Century somehow down to 10, as well as Columbia at 11, Ridgeview at 12, although they have a chance to potentially win the SIC, Shelley at 13, Bonneville at 14, Valley View at 15, and then Emmett to round it out at 16 for the 16-team playoff in 5A. This was the bracket that I think changed the most. There was a lot of teams, as my lights go out, there was a lot of teams that
dramatic effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing I can do about it. There's a lot of teams that moved up, like Lewiston. I expected Lewiston to move up. I didn't expect them to go up 6 spots. And I didn't expect Sandpoint to still be above them at the end of the day. Same with Twin Falls after the loss to Hillcrest. They moved up as well. I think there's still a lot to be said in 5A. Looking at the playoffs, if they started today, Hillcrest would host Emmett, Ridgeview and Blackfoot, Lakeland and Shelley now into the mix, Twin Falls and Columbia, Bishop Kelly hosts Valley View, Century and Sandpoint. That's a game I'm extremely curious about if that was to start today. And Skyline, Bonneville, and Minico will host Lewiston. Jonah, what game, if the playoffs were to start today, do you think would be the biggest one you'd keep your eye on?
I would say the Ridgeview Blackfoot game. Ridgeview's just been a team that I'm kind of like on and off about. I believe they got a new coach this year. He's definitely turned this program around. And first playoff look for them, that could be a big chance for them because they've had some very impressive wins this year. So, and then like Blackfoot, we'll see if they can pull off something as well.
Yeah, Gary Thorson was the new head coach that stepped in there. And I mean, I know you guys talked about it last week on the Prepcast, but Ridgeview is not too far away from being undefeated this year, just a couple plays away. And the same thing could actually absolutely be said about Columbia. They're the team that's played Bishop Kelly the closest. So maybe those teams in, the Treasure Valley are a lot better than some people are giving credit outside of, of Bishop Kelly. Well, let's take a look at the slate for this week's games. As we mentioned, it's led by Bishop Kelly and Ridgeview. That's a massive game. Bonneville and Skyview, Columbia and Valley View. That's a big one to, decide if Columbia is for real or not. I think they are. Emmett and Nampa, is that a chance for, Nampa to put some spoilers on Emmett's season? Idaho Falls and Shelley, a game hopefully Shelley can maybe get their second win of the year. Jerome Caldwell, both teams, trying to finish strong. Madison Minico, like we already talked about. Mountain Home and Filer. This was a game I have my eye on. I'll give my opinion later. Pocatello and Preston. And then Sandpoint Lakeland, a huge game, as well as Twin Falls and Burley. Jonah, if you had to pick a game, what stands out to you in 5A?
A team you mentioned earlier, the Valley View at Columbia game. I actually got to watch Columbia play at Skyview last week. It's a crosstown rivalry. Those games are always going to be close, so it's kind of hard to tell with that, especially with how, Skyview hasn't been very good this year. But Columbia, they've got a really good running game, and their defense has been very on and off, but they looked really solid. I'm curious to see if Columbia can pull off a win. They, like you said earlier, they were the closest to come to beating Bishop Kelly a couple of weeks ago. I believe it was only a 2-point game. I believe actually every single one of their losses has been by 2 points. So this is a chance for them to really win this and take the lead in the SIC above Valley View. And then for Valley View, at least, this is a chance for them to beat a big team. They lost to both Ridgeview and Bishop Kelly. So this is kind of a prove it game, prove it that you belong up in the top. So.
Absolutely. No, I think that could really come down to the wire. Columbia is, I think, a team that's continued to just prove everybody wrong. Sean, if you had to pick one outside of Highland and Skyline and, Rigby Hillcrest, which one is it? Or maybe you could pick Rigby Hillcrest. We didn't touch
I mean, you kind of hit on the one of Hillcrest is, well, Rigby doesn't have a lot to play for in that game, and I know Hillcrest is going to go out and play hard. Because Hillcrest, if you look at Hillcrest has a tough schedule. I think Rigby also, these are two teams that have played probably some of the toughest schedules of the whole, of all football. So where it's not going to matter that much, it'll be interesting to see what's out on the field. I definitely think Sandpoint Lakeland is a huge game, right? Sandpoint, I think everyone was very high in Sandpoint. I know I was. The passing attack was there. And I know Lakeland has quietly just beaten everyone. How does Sandpoint respond after losing to Lewiston? And, then if Sandpoint beats Lakeland and Lakeland, you could have a 3-way tie at the end. Same with Preston and Pocatello too, is if, Preston wins this, then they're 1-1 in the conference. Pocatello's 0-1, you could have a 3-way dance there. So these smaller conferences, a lot of big implications, a lot of pride for the end of the season to see what happens.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, especially the Sandpoint Lakeland game. Sandpoint, or Lakeland rather, is, I talked with Ryan Skaggs about it. He's adamant that Lakeland has the best offensive line in the entire northern Idaho portion. And I don't disagree that. I mean, Lewiston ran the ball very well against Sandpoint. Did Sandpoint also run the ball very well, effectively against Lewiston? Absolutely. But if Lakeland can kind of wear on Sandpoint, I think it's going to be hard. So Sandpoint's, air attack has to be on point if they want any chance in competing in that game. The other game that I look at in northern Idaho is Lake City Lewiston. It's, a game where after that huge win against Sandpoint, you think Lewiston would take care of business. But it's, kind of one of those trap games. Lake City's a good football team that's coming to the end of their season where it's a little underwhelming. And Lewiston's coming off this just massive high, biggest win of their, season, huge win for Zane Hobart. Is this a game where they're maybe, walking into this game thinking they already have it taken care of? I hope that's not the case, but it 100% could be a possibility. So lots of games still to be decided, and we're excited to bring all these games to you on IdahoSports.com. There are a couple of them. We'll hit on them at the end of the prep cast, but Before we do that, we will slide over to the 4A slate, take a quick break, and be back for that in just a few seconds.
Help dreams come true with the Ideal 529 Education Savings Program. Our easy-to-use tools make it simple to plan for your child's education. With tax benefits and ownership flexibility, Ideal is the perfect way to save for college, trade school, apprenticeships, K-12 education, and student loan repayment nationwide. Join us at our next webinar to learn more about the 529 plan. Enrolling takes just 15 minutes, and you can start with just $25. Visit idsaves.org to learn more.
Welcome back to Gem State Game Day here. Hayden Uhlenkott with you, as well as Sean Kane and Jonah Wockenfuss. I forgot one comment. Titus Osterman. We are frying Buell with Coach Helm. We'll hit on that in this 4A slate. I don't want to speculate too much of what's happening there. In the 4A classification, we'll start up north in District 1 with Bonners Ferry, Timberlake, and Moscow. Bonners Ferry defeated Timberlake last week to put themselves in a really good position to lock up that Intermountain League and, potentially also lock up the number 12 seed in 4A. In the other three-team conference, Sugar, Teton, and South Fremont. I believe South Fremont and Teton play this week, I believe. And then next week, Sugar and Teton play. That'll be a game that could maybe Teton play a little closer than what people expect. Teton's kind of having a tough year, but they've played a lot of good teams. In the Sawtooth Central Conference, Buell and Kimberly. That's the game that I think everyone has their eyes on to really decide who are one of the top teams in 4A. Kimberly's finally healthy. Is this a team that could truly make a run? And then Filer and Gooding fighting for the last couple spots in 4A as well. And then the Snake River Valley Conference with Fruitland at the top, Homedale not far behind, but coming off the loss last week. Then a lot of 2-1 teams, McCall Donnelly, as well as Weiser at the 2-1 spot. Weiser has a chance to maybe upend Fruitland. Who knows? And then American Falls and Snake River. Can't forget about that conference, as they are two teams that have yet to play. And I believe that's this week that will be deciding who's going to walk away with that conference. Well, let's take a look at the brackets. As always, this is just for fun. And this is, the brackets that Brandon Bainey puts together. And he's a heck of a lot smarter than me because it takes a lot of work to do this. And so obviously credit to Brandon. At the top, Sugar Salem has overtaken the top spot for the time being. Fruitland right behind them with Homedale, Kimberly, Buell, with Weiser, Teton, American Falls, and Snake River at 8 and 9. McCall Donnelly and Gooding, who's moved up a couple spots, and then Bonners Ferry to round out the Max Preps rankings. Sean, any surprises that you see in the 4A spot? I think we've seen it every single classification so far. 1 and 2 has flipped spots.
Yeah, 1 and 2 is switch spots. Nothing's surprising. I just look at Snake River. Snake River just lost to Westside by 1 point last week, and if Snake River wins that game, I would like to know what it'd look like this week. Right? They beat a Westside team. I think Snake River is a sneaky good team. They beat Teton by 1 point. So they're a sneaky team at 3 and 4 at the ninth spot. But that game between American Falls is going to be huge because American Falls is also having a great season at 6 and 1.
Absolutely. Jonah, I'll ask you this because I know you're a huge fan of the Max Preps rankings. After the 6th spot, everybody has a negative rating. Why do you think that is? I know it's probably because they don't think the teams have played good enough teams to have a positive rating, but what do you think is kind of the logic behind that if you had to, put a finger on it?
I mean, I think it's hard to tell what logic Max Preps is doing anyways. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I think, sometimes maybe they're just going off of the strength of the schedule, which I think is kind of hard to do because with a lot of these teams, it's not really their choice to pick who they play. They're just kind of put in their conferences and they have to just win the games that they're expected to win. So I'm not 100% sure, honestly. Max Preps is definitely not my friend, but yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the insight. We'll even look at 3A. I think 3A is a very similar outlook as well.
And I think the negative comes in when you lose to a team that's considered a weaker team, whatever that is, right? So I think when you lose to a team that you should have beaten, I think that's where you get in maybe the negative or what they consider being a weaker opponent. I think. Don't quote me.
Well, and I mean, yeah, you look at that. There's only 5 teams in the conference that have 1 loss or less. I mean, most teams have racked up quite a few losses this year. And yeah, it depends. I think 4A is also a spot where a lot of 4A schools play down. They don't necessarily play up. And maybe that affects them.
Play your region or more or less, right? You're going to play where you can get games and don't have to break the bank on the budget. I think we're very regional in Idaho, and it makes sense money-wise for ADs and financing these things. So I think you're regional and you're kind of not necessarily stuck, but semi-stuck, because if you're a 5A team, you don't want to lose to Sugar Salem. That's not going to help. It might be a wash because they have a high ranking, but if you lose to a lower classification, I know that's a big decrease in that ranking.
Absolutely. Let's go play Rigby. Let's lose by 60 and no one notices. It helps us at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's why they don't tell you, right? Because then people will try to schedule in a manner that would maybe help that. And I think so maybe there's some good, reasoning to not knowing exactly, but I don't know.
Who knows?
Jonah likes them. I don't.
We love Max Preps over here.
Well, Snake River and American Falls would play each other right now if the playoffs started today. I believe that's because they don't get a first round bye. I'm assuming that's my first instinct there, which is just makes that game this Friday even bigger. To who gets home field advantage, Buell and Bonners Ferry. As Bonners Ferry makes a nice trip down to Buell, that'd be fun for them. Teton and McCall Donnelly, and then Gooding will play Weiser to wrap up the first round of the 4A classification if the playoffs were to start today. Well, let's look at the slate this evening for this weekend. And at the top, Coal Valley Christian and Payette. Payette started the season so strong and right now is, really hitting the bulk of their schedule, and it's going to be beating on them. Could Coal Valley be a team to continue to have them fall further? Kimberly and Buell, like we already mentioned, a massive game in Kimberly this weekend. McCall Donnelly and Homedale, another huge game on the 4A slate in the Snake River Valley Conference. That's a game that's going to decide, anywhere from 2 to 4. And then Moscow Timberlake, another game that, could one of these teams finish strong? You're basically have no chance to make the playoffs, but could one of them end their season a little more positive than what it started? Mountain Home Filer, this was a game that, like I mentioned, I want to touch on in a second. Orfino Bonners Ferry, Snake River American Falls, Teton South Fremont. That's a good game there to see who ends up in potentially one or in the second spot behind Sugar Salem. Weiser Fruitland. Could Tom Harrison finally upend Fruitland as the lights go out once more? And then Wood River and Gooding. Sean, I'll start with you. What's the game on the 4A slate that is the most intriguing to you?
Oh, it's got to be Snake River American Falls. I mean, like I said, Snake River's the record I don't think is indicative to how good they've been playing recently. They're 3-4, and we talked about this earlier in the season. Snake River, they played Homedale, Sugar, Kimberly at the start of the season. I don't know if anyone had more of a gauntlet than Snake River. They didn't win those games, but they played the hard opponents. They beat South Fremont, they beat Teton by 1, and then almost beating Westside would have been just crazy. And then, you got American Falls, which, doesn't have the strongest strength of schedule, but they beat South Fremont 34-6. And Snake River beat South Fremont 21-8. So it's very competitive. I think this is going to be a good game. It's in Snake River. Speaking of Tom Harrison, he won like 10 championships with Snake River. So that's a good lead in there. The Snake River is a place where they know how to win, but American Falls playing really well. So I'm excited to see who wins that game, and it'll probably kind of answer some questions as far as what's going to happen with some of the Southeast Idaho teams in this bracket.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. Jonah, what pops at your eye?
This might be a little biased, but this is a game I'm going to be covering this week. It's Fruitland at Weiser. This is a game where Fruitland could really solidify their lead in first. They've looked real solid. I mean, last week, I believe they were trailing at the end of the first half and had some like unbelievable, I think it was like a 29-0 run or something like that in the second half, and just blew out, Homedale. And Homedale's in second, so it's not like Homedale's just some bad team. So Fruitland's got a real big chance to just solidify that lead. They've got some really good personnel on that team. And then for Weiser, this is a big chance for them to get an upset that a lot of people probably aren't predicting. But you always like the underdog story, and having a chip on your shoulder can take you a long ways. So we'll have to see how that game pans out.
Yeah, absolutely. Fruitland was in a game last week against Homedale where I believe they had like a 2nd and 55 and were able to convert on it. It was kind of wild. They racked up a crap ton of penalties and we're still able to get like a 68-yard touchdown out of it. So Fruitland, it is just a really explosive team. And yeah, maybe Weiser's the team. Who knows? That's going to be interesting to see on Friday. Some of the games that pop out to me, and it's mainly the teams that are on the bubble. Gooding versus Wood River. That's a game that Gooding cannot afford to lose as the 11 seed. If they drop that one to Wood River, or maybe even play Wood River close, that could be a game where they're looking on the outside because South Fremont's right behind them. A win versus Teton could easily bump them up above them. Filer and Mountain Home was a game that I had my eye on earlier, and only because that Filer was originally the 11 seed last week. And so I was prepping for it thinking, Filer is this team that cannot lose to Mountain Home. And then now looking at it, they're, outside looking in. But this is a game that you don't want to have, be close either if you're Filer playing up against a 5A school. And then I think obviously Kimberly and Buell. Kimberly's that team that, has such a tough start to the regular season. They, had to go play Sugar. They played Homedale. I think they played Fruitland, or not Homedale. They played Fruitland.
First game of the year.
Yeah, and they ended up getting injuries. Titus Osterman and was playing quarterback for half the year. They finally have McCray Bruning back that's at quarterback. Like, this is a team that's finally healthy, and they are, going up against a Buell team that's going to be solid. They're going to have a hard time against Buell, but that's going to decide everything in that conference. And so that's one that I think is really indicative of how 4A could potentially, land out. Well, when we come back, we will hit on the smallest classification in 11-man. We are flying through this Gem State game day without Brandon Bainey. And so when we do, we will come back for the 3A slate.
Once again, we have contributed to your ideal college savings program. Love, Grandma and Grandpa.
Ideal. Eventually, they'll appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. I love it.
College costs money.
Absolutely. Well, at the 3A slate to end our Gem State game day, we'll start at the top once more in the Central Idaho League. Priest River, Grangeville, St. Mary's, Kellogg, and Orofino. Priest River in a really good spot to win, but they have a huge game this week against St. Mary's. If that game were to end in a St. Mary's victory, you'd create a lot of chaos for a potential 3-way tie with Grangeville, who, right now is a really good max preps ranking in the sense of the Central Idaho League, not necessarily overall, but in the Central Idaho League, they have a good ranking. Could they be a team that, upsets Priest River? Ryrie, North Fremont, West J, Firth, and Salmon. Ryrie, North Fremont. That's the big game on the docket this week, as that's going to decide the nuke after such a, great season by the entire conference in a whole. Westside, Declo, Aberdeen, Malad. That one to me is still up into the air. Declo is really in a good spot to win, but 2 through 4 still has a chance to move around a bit. Western Idaho Conference. New Plymouth right now leading the way, but I think Nampa Christian might, have something to say about that. New Plymouth's had a great year for the season. Nampa Christian has played a lot harder of a schedule, I think, and Nampa Christian is one of the top tier teams in the state of Idaho, especially in 3A. Let's take a look at the bracket at the top west side. I believe last week it was Ryrie, so we're going to go 4 for 4 in teams flip-flopping through 1 and 2. North Fremont's at 3, Aberdeen 4, Declo at 5, Nampa Christian holding on to probably the best spot you can get outside of East Idaho, West J at 7, New Plymouth at 8, Malad 9, Melba 10, 0-6, Firth at 11, Soda at 12, and then the last seed, Soda right now is not getting into the playoffs because the Central Idaho League is hanging out in the rear through 13, 15, 16, and 17, loving to get a chance to move in with such a low max preps ranking. But Jonah, outside of Melba, since I know that's your favorite school, 0-6, anything stand out to you there?
I know Aberdeen has been a very solid team all year. I mean, they've proven that they can be contenders this year. It's good to see them up top. I'm not sure if a couple of weeks ago they were a little lower. I believe they were, but it's just good to see them, as well as like Nampa Christian, like you said, they're holding on to a good spot right now, and they're looking really solid this year. And I think they have the best shot in the Western Idaho Conference for sure.
I would totally agree with you. We'll look quickly through the slate of if the playoffs were to start today. North Fremont and Firth, Aberdeen and Melba. Malad would go play Declo. That'd be an interesting game. New Plymouth then plays West Jeff. Sean, if you had to pick a game there in the quarterfinals, if it started, or the play-in, if it started today, what would be the game that piques your attention to where maybe somebody could pull an upset in the first round?
Oh man, what was at the top again? Probably. Well, Firth and North Fremont, no, but if you go back down, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Maybe New Plymouth over West Jefferson. West Jefferson is a team that is kind of a head scratcher. I mean, they haven't lost more than one game, but maybe New Plymouth. That's a team that's been kind of interesting to me. That's the owner's alma mater, Paul Kingsbury. So we have to always throw in a New Plymouth plug. I'm paid to do it. But no, that would be pretty good. I think Malad Declo's interesting. Yeah, there's just a lot of firepower in that first round, right? The people that get buys are deserving so, but man, I don't see a lot of games where I see an upset occurring.
Yeah, I agree. You look at that 1 through 5 in the max preps rankings. Like that seems like what the rankings are darn near every single year. Like 3A and the wing T has it right, and there's no one that can really do anything about it. At least not in that classification. In the chat, Colton Bell, late to the party. Are you guys already touching on the 1A playoff race? Big matchups. Apologize if it's already talked about. No, it's all right, Colton. That's actually the Idaho 8-man podcast. That's tomorrow night with Will Heineke, Coach Lane Kirkland, as well as Brandon Bainey. I think he'll be there. They'll touch on it, and they will give you all the 8-man action you could hope and dream of, and a lot more insight than what we could ever provide you. So tune in tomorrow for the Idaho 8-man Prepcast, as well as any other Prepcasts going on for the IdahoSports.com team. Well, let's look at the slate this evening for 3A. Aberdeen West Side. That's a good game to, could Aberdeen pull an upset? That's something that you might want to wonder about. Firth and West J. Firth probably is undermanned against West Jefferson, but you never know playing at home. Grangeville, Kellogg. That's a game Grangeville should take care of. Will they against a Kellogg team? I don't know. Malad and Declo, another solid game down in southern Idaho. Melba, Parma. Can Melba get their first win of the year? Nampa Christian and Marsing. A game Marsing maybe could play spoiler against a Nampa Christian team. Priest River, St. Mary's, a huge game up north, and then Ryrie and North Fremont. Jonah, I'll start with you. In the 3A games, what is the most important game that you see?
I like the Marsing at Nampa Christian game. I'm pretty sure this is Nampa Christian's senior night, so this is, big opportunity for them to go out with a bang. But Nampa Christian, started off conference play playing some of the bottom teams. Now they're kind of towards the end of the season. They have to play against Marsing and then I believe New Plymouth next week. So big chance for them to kind of prove that they belong at the top and just to really assert some dominance in this conference. And then, yeah, like you said earlier with Marsing, this is a chance for them to kind of be that spoiler and kind of spoil the party for Nampa Christian and maybe give them a little bit of a reality check as they've kind of had an easy schedule these last 2 weeks, but now you have to go against the top people in your conference. So it's a big chance for Nampa Christian to prove themselves and a big chance for Marsing to be the spoilers.
Yeah, I think this is Nampa Christian's year. If they want to make a run into 3A, this has to be the year. There's a little bit of, I wouldn't say parity in the 3A, but it's probably the closest there ever has been in a while. So I think this has to be the chance for Nampa Christian. Sean, there's a ton of games in Southeast Idaho. Pick 2 of them that you think are good, or 3 or 4.
I'm going to have to start with Ryrie North Fremont, right? This is, quintessentially one of the biggest game maybe in 3A when it comes down to who's going to be at the top of the seeding. I'm checking out the media poll that came out on IdahoSports.com, and North Fremont's at 3, Ryrie at 1. This is a game. Matt Harris, who used to work for Idaho Sports, is the AD of Ryrie. I know he's really busy with BYU playing Utah. He's very involved in that matchup, but I'm sure he'll be at this game Friday. But North Fremont has been a team, they get the new coach. This last week against Firth, Owen Reed, a senior, had 14 carries, 151 yards, 2 TDs, 8 tackles, and an interception return for a touchdown. North Fremont brings the defense. Ryrie has been running and throwing all over everyone and putting up huge amounts of points. I think it's going to be kind of a contrast, maybe defense, offense. It should be a phenomenal matchup. It is at Ryrie. I'm excited to see who wins this one. I think this will be, a game that definitely be talked about on Prepcast next week. And then obviously we have to go Aberdeen Westside. It's always a battle. This game is just become such a huge rivalry. Last year it was in Westside. It came down to the end. Aberdeen with Lupe Ortiz at the helm, quarterback, run it, can do it all. Westside with Drake Sage. Drake Sage had 26 carries, 147 yards, 2 TDs, and that wing tee you talked about. And I don't know if any team does the wing tee better than Westside. They must run it at birth. You're born. You're going to be an offensive lineman. You're going to block to the left, and you block to the left until you're a 12th grader, and they do it phenomenally well. I've watched so many Westside games, and I always think, how does the opposing team's defensive coordinator, what do you do? And especially for Aberdeen, they know these guys. They've been in this battle for a couple of years now at the top of their conference. The Westside's prevailed, went on to win state championships. What's it going to take for an Aberdeen to figure out this puzzle that is the Westside wing tee? It should just be a great game in Aberdeen. Aberdeen, also a very cool location to go see a game. It's about a stone's throw from American Falls. So Aberdeen, it'll be a good game. Aberdeen will be out in full force. They have a cannon that goes off after touchdowns. I believe Westside does too. There's a lot of cannons in 3A. I don't know if Brandon's researched that, but we'll have to get how many cannons per 3A team. But a lot of balls will be coming out of those cannons when those guys play.
Absolutely. I want to ask you one thing, Sean, because since 3A is predominantly the classification that runs wing tee, and maybe once a year we talk about why the wing tee is such a dominant formation, but why is it that so many teams can't catch on to defending the wing tee?
I think the way to look at it, and how I've grown to learn about it, is that the teams that do it have the culture of their youth programs, and everyone runs it it's not like they get to high school and they teach the kid wing tee. A lot of these programs have just run it, and a lot of these teams have had the same coaches for a number of years, and you don't see that as much anymore. I think that's something we've noticed a lot is coaching. You're not seeing 20-year coaching guys anymore like me. I'm a relic as far as that goes. You're going to see new teams, and I don't think you can just come in and plug in a wing tee offense. I think back to a long time ago when Hillcrest won the state championship. They ran the wing tee, and it was very difficult to stop at even an upper classification. But I think you've got to try to hold the edges the best you can, and then make sure you've almost got someone spying the middle, not necessarily to go after the quarterback, but the running back. But it's easier said than done. And what Westside does really well is they jab with that wing tee, jab, and then they'll take one over the top for a pass if you fall asleep to that jab. So they're pretty good that way. And Aberdeen runs a similar kind of wing tee, but Lupe Ortiz, the quarterback, is a phenomenal runner, and I think he reads the defense. And I think that's what a lot of really good quarterbacks in the wing tee is. They read that defense and decide what they're going to do, whether actually hand it off or take it themselves. But I am no wing tee expert. I've just seen it a lot. And I think if someone knew how to beat it, they would have came up with that book a long time ago and put it out. But it's difficult.
I would bet there is a book. It's just not very popular. I don't know. At least that's what it seems like. Yeah, and that's why 3A continues to just hail down in southern Idaho. I mean, it's been a while since anybody from up north has had, or even the Treasure Valley's had a chance at winning, and so it's not too surprising.
And you'll hear right as you go on as the season and you get to playoffs, teams that play defense and run the ball win state championships. I mean, it won't be it'll be said 30 times between now and the next whatever prep casts, right? That if you can play defense and run the ball, and if you ran the ball all year in the wing tee, it's easier to keep doing that. So I know that's a predominant reason, because when it comes to playoff football or late season football and it's cold outside and you don't got the dome, tackling someone in the wing tee 13 times is not exciting to anyone.
Absolutely. We'll speak of cold weather up in North Idaho. Priest River St. Mary's. This is the game that we touched on earlier, where this will essentially decide the Central Idaho League. St. Mary's is a team that throws the ball quite a bit, and then you have this Priest River team that's, I think, finally getting healthy. And they dropped like 4 games in a row. Ryan Skaggs and I had their coach onto the prep cast, and we just gave them ultimate bad luck. They lost the next 4 games. And so now they're healthy. Maybe they have a chance in locking up that game. And then in the chat, Ryan Skaggs, buys are deserving with an asterisk with the exception of the CIL. Yep, that's right. Priest River gets to host a playoff game if they can lock up the conference. And that means somebody from Southern Idaho has to make the way all the way up to Priest River, where I don't even go.
Now in 3A, do they get to? Now I remember last year at 3A, they can redraw it if the distance is too far. Maybe someone can confirm that with me if I'm not mistaken.
I would love to confirm. I know last year Grangeville hosted Firth in this in that quarterfinal game. But you're right. You look at the moment, North Fremont's missing out on a playoff bid, and they're the 3rd best team per the Max Preps ranking. So it's definitely a controversial. I think if Priest River was, if they went and played a team like West Jefferson, like Grangeville did, and dominated West Jefferson, I think maybe it's a different story. But then Grangeville went and played West Jefferson and lost by 30. And so it's like, okay, well, that makes me feel pretty confident about North Idaho. Who knows? Maybe they can pull it off and have that home field advantage. It's going to be kind of tough to say. As always on not the North Idaho Prepcast, but the Idaho Gem State Game Day, there are the Gridiron game picks. They aren't up this week quite yet that I've seen. But fill those out. You have an opportunity to win $25 this week. And if you have a chance, you could maybe, just maybe, if you're consistent, win the overall season championship. It's going to be tough. Let me see if I can pull that up. I can't pull it up. I lost it. That's all right. There's a lot of, good people that pick games, and it's tough to compete with. Sean Kane, Ryan Skaggs, Idaho Sports doing well. Week 9, we have quite a few games on the slate. Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene. It's going to be on IdahoSports.com. Fruitland and Weiser, that's where Jonah will be. Buell and Kimberly, Skyline Highland, that's where Sean will be. And then Preston and Pocatello with Hillcrest and Rigby as well. So a ton of huge games in the 11-man world. And I actually think I'm the only one with an 8-man game. So I guess you guys are all lucky.
I don't know. 8-man's pretty fun to watch. It's pretty entertaining.
They'll talk about it tomorrow. Biggest game in 2A. It's Friday night. It's going to be fun. But that'll be it for us on the Gem State Game Day. It's natural. Jonah, any last words since Sean and I talked for the last 10 minutes?
No, let's you know what? I just want to go to any Melba fan and just tell them that I have no beef against you, and I hope you guys win this week. That'll be great. Finish the season strong. Let's go Melba.
Absolutely. Go Melba. They're in a good spot to win. Well, as for Jonah Wockenfuss, Sean Kane, I'm Hayden Uhlenkott. We will catch you guys later on Gem State Game Day. Thanks for kicking it with us.